From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day, this is Dateline Malacañang. Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has directed the Department of Transportation or DOTR to suspend the scheduled implementation of the approved fare increases for public utility vehicles or PUVs. In a video message on Wednesday, President Marcos said raising the minimum fare for public transport is inappropriate given the burden that it may place on Filipinos who are already feeling the effects of the ongoing crisis in the Middle East. President Marcos emphasized the need to continue providing support to affected Filipinos, including the commuters. President Marcos' directive came after the Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board on Tuesday announced that fare increases ranging from 1 peso to as much as 40 pesos would be implemented for all modes of land transportation starting Thursday. President Marcos said the commuting public, mostly workers and students, cannot afford to suffer further as they are already bearing the brunt of tensions in the Gulf region, which have driven up prices of fuel products and basic commodities. He said PUV drivers need not worry since government interventions are already in place to help them cope with the present challenges caused by the Middle East conflict. President Marcos also instructed the DOTR to launch free rides nationwide to help ease the financial burden of commuters. He also ordered to offer fare discounts to passengers of the Metro Rail Transit or MRT and Light Rail Transit or LRT. On top of relief measures, President Marcos also directed the giving of discounts on toll roads to reduce costs for motorists. President Marcos assured that efforts are underway to cushion the impact of the ongoing conflict on daily life.
Sa aking palagay, dahil nga may problema pa rin tayo dahil sa gera sa Middle East, ay sabi ko siguro hindi ito ang panahon para magtaas ng pamasahe para sa ating mga kababayan. Kaya tinutos ko sa DOTR na suspindihin muna ang fare hike at i-defer muna natin yan, i-postpone muna natin yan dahil nasa gitna ngayon tayo nitong sitwasyon na ito na kailangan patuloy ang ating pag-alalay sa ating mga commuter, sa lahat ng mga ating manggagawa, mga estudyante, lahat ng gumagamit ng ating transport system. Huwag po mag-alala ang ating mga transport workers dahil mamadaliin po namin, dadagdagan po namin ang suporta sa inyo para naman ay hindi kayo masyadong mahirapan. Ang DOTR ay pinutusan ko na sisimula na ang libreng sakay sa buong Pilipinas. At pwede po ninyong gamitin na muna yan para pangbawas gastos sa pang-araw-araw. At sa MRT at LRT ay magdidiskwento po tayo doon sa pamasahe. Bukod pa doon, sa mga toll road ay meron din tayong inutos na diskwento para mas maliit na ngayon ang bayad ng taong bayan sa paggamit ng mga toll road. Alahanin niyo po ninyo ang inyong pamahalaan ay laging nandito. Lagi kaming nag-iisip ng panibagong paraan upang matiyak na ang inyong pamumuhay ay normal, maayos at ligtas.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. said the possible suspension of excise tax on oil products would depend on global price movements amid uncertainty stemming from tensions in the Middle East. President Marcos, in a media interview in San Juan City, said the government is carefully studying the situation before deciding on any intervention. President Marcos noted that exercising the power to suspend excise tax requires a thorough assessment of multiple factors. President Marcos said global developments play a significant role in determining domestic fuel prices, adding that uncertainties in the duration and impact of the ongoing conflict in the Gulf region make it difficult to predict price movements. He said the government is closely monitoring key global supply routes, including major oil transit points that could influence supply and pricing. President Marcos assured the public that the government remains ready to act should conditions warrant intervention. He noted that to date there is no immediate cause for alarm since the supply of petroleum products remains stable.
Oh, that depends. Marami, and it's a very complicated calculation. We will see. Depends on the trends. You have to watch the trends of on oil prices. We will just have to look. It's very hard to say because it's all speculation. We don't know how long this will last for. We don't know what the effects are. We don't know what will happen in the Straits of Hormuz. So right now we are just adjusting to the situation. And when the situation calls for it, then we will see like when to exercise the power and how much by. But right now we don't have a problem sa supply with food. We don't have a problem sa supply with petroleum products, including fertilizer for the farmer. So that's our main concern. So so far we've been able to keep everything at normal levels. Everything is normal. No need to hoard. Now our vendors are cooperating and they are keeping the prices down at normal from what they were maybe a month ago. Pareho pa rin. So that's what we need to.
The House of Representatives and the Senate have both approved bills granting the president authority to suspend or reduce the excise tax on petroleum products to mitigate the impact of rising crude oil prices. The Senate version allows for the suspension or reduction of the excise tax on fuel when the average price of Dubai crude oil reaches or exceeds $80 per barrel for 1 month, while the House version requires the president to declare a state of national emergency to justify the suspension or reduction.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. supervised the monitoring of prices and supply of prime commodities and agricultural products at a public market and grocery store in San Juan City. The activity was a joint effort by the Department of Agriculture or DA and the Department of Trade and Industry or DTI to ensure price stability and adequate supply amid tensions in the Middle East. President Marcos, joined by DA Secretary Francisco Chu Laurel Jr. and DTI Secretary Maria Cristina Roque, went to Agora Market where he inspected the prices and supply of basic commodities and agricultural products at the stalls. President Marcos said the monitoring would continue to stabilize the commodity prices and supply.
Iniikot namin ng mga iba't ibang palengke para tiyakin na ang presyo naman ng pagkain natin ay hindi biglang tataas at nakakatiyak naman sa Department of Agriculture na ang supply ay sapat. Kaya hindi kailangan mag-hoarding ating mga vendor, hindi kailangan wag nyo naman samantalan at buka na pang hindi nila ginagawa. At kayo nagpapasalamat dahil dito sa tulungan, dito sa pagtutulungan nating lahat isa't isa at konting malasakit sa bawat kapwa Pilipino ay makikita natin na malalampasan din natin itong hamon na hinaharap natin. Kaya unang-una, siyempre, food supply ang pinakamahalaga. Ito, kaya natin makontrol. Ang presyo ng langis, siyempre, binapantayan lang natin kung ano yung mangyayari sa gera.
DTI Secretary Cristina Roque said manufacturers of basic goods, including canned sardines, bread, bottled water, instant noodles, coffee, canned meat, and soap, have committed to maintaining current prices for the next 30 days. Chu Laurel, on the other hand, said the DA is studying the possible implementation of price caps on imported rice due to a reported increase in retail prices. Retail prices have reached 60 pesos to 65 pesos per kilo. In some markets, the DA is considering a 50 pesos per kilo price cap on imported rice to curb rising costs driven by increased freight rates amid crisis in the Gulf region.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. said there is no need for hoarding, despite uncertainties caused by ongoing tensions in the Middle East, assuring the public that the country's food supply remains sufficient. Speaking to reporters after inspecting Agora Market in San Juan City, President Marcos said the government continues to monitor the situation to ensure that supply and prices of basic commodities remain stable. President Marcos said concerned agencies have been visiting public markets to check on the prices of goods and ensure that vendors comply with government guidelines. President Marcos noted that price caps and suggested retail prices are being followed in many markets. He added that the Department of Agriculture continued to ensure adequate supply of key commodities. President Marcos said everything is normal, promising that the government would continue to monitor the situation closely to ensure that it remains manageable amid the crisis. He expressed confidence that cooperation among stakeholders would help the country overcome current challenges.
Nagpapasalamat din kami sa mga bento dahil ay pumayag naman sila na hindi tataas ang presyo at hindi sila mag-price gouging at hindi sila magsasamantala dito sa krisis na nangyayari sa Middle East. Kaya't ay patuloy naman ang pag-inspeksyon natin para tiyakin na ang food supply, hindi lamang ang food supply, kundi ang presyo ng pagkain ay at the very least ay makikita natin na ma-maintain lang natin sa dating level. Titignan natin tuloy-tuloy pa ito dahil hindi natin malaman gaano katagal ang gera na nasa Iran, nasa Middle East. Kaya patuloy ang ating pag-inspeksyon para naman ang kabuhayan ng ating mga kababayan ay hindi masyadong maapektuhan nitong krisis na hinaharap natin sa Middle East. At dito lang sa Pilipinas, normal lang muna ang ating mga presyuhan at tinitiyak nga natin kahit hindi ang supply natin, maganda naman ang supply natin ng pagkain, ng bigas, lahat ng mga basic goods. Kaya yung ating mga kababayan, sinasabi natin, hindi naman kailangan mag-holding at hindi tayo nagkukulang sa food supply. Ito ang pagpunta namin dito para tiyakin na ang presyo na ating ibinigay sa ating mga market vendor ay talagang sinusundan. At sa nakikita naman natin, ay sinusundan naman ang mga price cap na nilalagay ng DTI. Everything is normal and we'll just keep working to make sure that it stays that way para naman kabuhayan na ating mga kababayan ay hindi paapektuhan.
Trade Secretary Maria Cristina Roque said there is sufficient stock of basic necessities in supermarkets and grocery stores. She added that her office would hold meetings with stakeholders every 2 weeks to monitor the situation and discuss developments. Agriculture Secretary Francisco Chu Laurel Jr. said the DA has not monitored any spike in the prices of agricultural commodities for now. Chu Laurel, however, acknowledged a shortage may occur in the coming months. He added that sourcing imports may also be difficult, noting that other countries could face similar challenges.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has directed concerned agencies to sustain the repatriation of overseas Filipino workers or OFWs affected by the ongoing tensions in the Middle East and ensure the swift delivery of assistance to those in need. In a statement, Executive Secretary Ralph Recto said the President's instructions were clear to continue the government's humanitarian airlift operations. Recto noted that flights arranged by the Department of Migrant Workers will proceed. According to government's latest data, nearly 1,100 Filipinos have been repatriated through arranged flights. Some of the flights also served as medical evacuations, including those for sick Filipinos requiring immediate care. Recto said the most recent Mercy flight brought home 343 OFWs and their dependents from Riyadh and Al Khobar in Saudi Arabia, as well as Bahrain on March 15. He said another chartered flight is being arranged before the end of the month. Ongoing evacuation efforts are also being carried out in Israel, Kuwait, and Bahrain, with priority given to the safety of Filipinos in affected areas. Recto said the funding for the operations comes from the 2 billion pesos agarang kalinga at saklolo para sa mga OFW na nangangailangan or Action Fund under the Department of Migrant Workers or DMW, ensuring sustained support for distressed OFWs despite the high cost of chartered flights. He also ensured that there are enough funds to continue the operations of the shuttle service, adding that returning Filipinos also receive comprehensive assistance, including food, temporary shelter, psychosocial counseling, and medical services. Recto said the government is also strengthening the reintegration program to help returning OFWs transition to local employment, noting that their globally competitive skills could help address workforce gaps in key industries. Recto said some agencies have already opened employment pathways for repatriates, including a partnership between the DMW and the Department of Education to hire qualified Filipino teachers in public schools. Recto said the government is also ramping up coordination among key agencies to mitigate the impact of rising fuel prices on the country. He convened a meeting with frontline agencies on March 16 to accelerate the rollout of assistance measures following directives from the President. Recto ordered the Department of Budget and Management or DBM to expedite the release of funds for cash assistance to transport drivers under the Assistance to Individuals in Crisis Situation Program of the Department of Social Welfare and Development or DSWD. He also directed the Department of Transportation or DOTR to expand relief measures including the Libreng Sakay program to ease the burden of the commuting public. Additional measures include securing toll-fee discounts for public utility vehicles and reducing select aviation charges to reduce airline costs and fares. The Department of Agriculture or DA was also instructed to ensure stable food supply and prices, particularly for rice, while scaling up support for farmers and fisherfolk to protect livelihoods and sustain food production. Officials present at the meeting were DSWD Secretary Rex Gatchalian, DOTR Secretary Giovanni Lopez, Department of Agriculture Secretary Francisco Chu Laurel, and DBM Secretary Rolando Toledo.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippine Embassy in Baghdad, Iraq, said 12 Filipino nationals had been rescued following an Iranian attack on the vessel they were manning near Basra in Iraq on March 11. The 12 were among the crew members of Marshall Islands flagged oil tanker Safesia Vishnu, Safe Sea Vishnu, which was hit by a suspected Iranian suicide boat while on Iraqi waters, killing one Indian national. The Philippine Embassy in Baghdad on Wednesday confirmed that the 12 are now safe in the Basra Governorate in southern Iraq. The embassy said medical and welfare assistance were extended to the seafarers. The attack comes as the raging conflict in the Middle East enters its second week, with Tehran threatening to set fire on any ship trying to pass the Strait of Hormuz.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA, is ramping up its emergency response operations to better cater to overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs, affected by the Middle East crisis, while assuring that funds remain sufficient to sustain repatriation and welfare support efforts. At a press briefing, OWA Chief Patricia Yvonne Kaunan said the agency is in the process of hiring more people to strengthen its hotline operations as well as its repatriation and assistance division after receiving over 500 applicants, with some former OFWs. She said OWA receives hundreds of requests for assistance from the OFWs and their families. Kaunan also said OWA now has a social media watch that monitors Filipinos asking for help through Facebook posts and comments. Migrant Workers Secretary Hans Leo Kakdak said on-site assistance also continues for OFWs still in the conflict areas. Assistance includes distribution of basic needs, temporary accommodation, and transport assistance. To facilitate safe return to the Philippines, the government has deployed a multi-layered repatriation strategy utilizing commercial and chartered flights as well as land crossings in nearby countries, especially in areas where there is limited airspace. He said that DMW, OWA, and Department of Foreign Affairs, or DFA, personnel have also been pre-positioned in key transit points to assist OFWs from exit to arrival. As of the latest data, nearly 1,200 government-funded repatriation tickets have been secured for these OFWs, including some dependents. Meanwhile, Kaunan assured that OWA funding remains adequate to cover all emergency operations, including repatriation, accommodation, and other support services. She said the executive branch also gave assurance that OFWs will be prioritized and will be given support.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. pledged to strengthen government mechanisms aimed at safeguarding the rights and welfare of media workers and intensifying the fight against misinformation and disinformation. During the oath-taking of the Kapisanan ng mga Broadcaster ng Pilipinas, or KBP Board of Trustees at Malacañang Palace in Manila, President Marcos underscored the importance of continued and closer collaboration with media stakeholders to enhance transparency in government and uphold democracy in the country. President Marcos said media organizations and practitioners play a significant role in combating fake news, stressing that his administration sees them as bearers of facts, as voice of the people, especially amid global geopolitical tensions and uncertainties. President Marcos said the government needs the help of all media workers to help the public updated on the true situation of the state of the world and of the country.
In this time of global uncertainty, we lean onto our media to be bearers of facts, to police abuse, and to be the voice of our people. With the crises and the difficulties and the shocks that the world is providing, not only the Philippines, but the entire globe, it is more essential than ever that we combat fake news and disinformation. And that in that way, we will be able to face those challenges that we are now beginning to feel, and our people can much better address the ways and means that we can mitigate the effects of the difficulties that we are seeing developing, especially along the horizon. And in this, the government is in great need of help of all the media practitioners so that we can get the valuable information about the interventions that we are undertaking, about the true situation of the state of the world and of our country, and so that our people, as I have mentioned, can make the proper decisions, can go to the right people for assistance, and are knowledgeable about what is available in terms of what help can be provided to them.
President Marcos, however, acknowledged that the Philippines remains one of the most dangerous places for journalists, citing the 2025 World Press Freedom Index, which showed that the country ranked 116 out of 180 countries and territories. He said the ranking reflects the country's difficult and complicated media landscape. President Marcos nevertheless said the government would ensure the safety and welfare of all journalists at all times. He said a presidential task force on media security has partnered with the National Bureau of Investigation to reinforce the fight against violence and threats against media workers, as well as with the Public Attorney's Office to provide legal services to our media personnel. He added the Department of Information and Communications Technology, or DICT, collaborated with Google in May 2025 and with Meta in February 2026 to strengthen content safeguards. The Presidential Communications Office has also signed a memorandum of understanding with print media to intensify the campaign against misinformation and disinformation. He said his administration has also included a proposed Right to Information Act in the LEDAC Common Legislative Agenda for the 20th Congress.
Additionally, the Presidential Communications Office signed a memorandum of understanding with print media, and this month they've done that this month to implement Oplan Contra Fake News. This shall create a rapid response system to counter the spread of disinformation. We are promoting greater transparency and accountability in the bureaucracy. This supports our efforts to report facts and to have facts and truth reported. The administration has pushed for the passage of the Right to Information Act by including it in the LEDAC Common Legislative Agenda for the 20th Congress. We have also launched the DPWH Transparency and Integrity Chain portals and mandated all GOCCs to establish their own transparency portals to foster government accountability.
The induction of the new members of the KBP Board of Trustees highlights its crucial role as both a trade organization and a self-regulatory body for the country's broadcast industry, particularly in the rapidly evolving media environment shaped by digital transformation. Established in April 1973, the KBP has over 52 years of successful self-regulation, during which it has worked to upgrade the standards of broadcasting and journalism in the Philippines.
Dateline Malacañang.
Finally, for Dateline Malacañang, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. presided over the oath-taking of former Tourism Secretary Cristina Garcia Frasco as Presidential Advisor for Sustainable and Resilient Communities, or SRC. Several photos released by the Presidential Communications Office showed President Marcos and Frasco shaking hands during the ceremony held at the Malacañang Palace in Manila. As President Marcos's new advisor, Frasco is tasked with facilitating the integration and alignment of national government initiatives, plans, policies, and programs aimed at promoting sustainable and resilient communities. These initiatives include interventions related to disaster risk reduction, climate adaptation, environmental stewardship, and sustainable local development. Frasco's new role will also enable her to coordinate with national government agencies, local government units, and relevant stakeholders to support the effective implementation of presidential directives and priority in national initiatives relating to sustainable and resilient communities. She is also mandated to identify gaps and bottlenecks in efforts to attain the government's goals. Frasco led the Department of Tourism from 2022 until she assumed her new role. On Tuesday, Malacañang said President Marcos continued to trust Frasco, stressing that the chief executive remains confident in her ability to carry out her new responsibilities.
Dateline Malacañang.
And that is all for today's Dateline Malacañang for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. This has been Bea Gaza-de Guzman.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila. Dateline Malacañang.